Nasty Ronnie, thank you so much for joining me here on Disturbing the Priest. How are you?
Hey, Brandon, man, it's good to be here. I appreciate you bringing a little bit of old school into your show today because we're going to disturb the priest today, brother.
Oh, for sure, man. Now, my first thing I want to ask is 41 years. It's been quite a journey for you. How are you going to celebrate 41 years of Nasty Savage in the future?
Well, it's kind of a blessing, you know. So every day is a celebration, and then when you have a blank canvas to work on, still, I mean, that's a hell of a extra celebration because we still are engaging with the metal community, the metal media, like yourself, and we're recording a new album, so we have shows booked. I just did a promo for a show we're doing in Colombia. So, we're celebrating by making it happen, by staying alive and staying relevant, and trying to grab a piece of someone else's energy to bring it into ours, whether it be a promoter, another band, another stage. So it's just a blessing. It's really an exciting time. We're at a crossroads, but man, it's a celebration every day.
For sure, man. And it's it's an honor to have you on because the band has such an amazing legacy and has influenced so many bands. Pretty much the whole US death metal scene might as well, um, have ties to you and your band. Now, I do want to celebrate the band's history by kind of going over some of the timeline here.
Sure.
Before, of course, the demos and everything. Who were your favorite vocalists growing up?
Excuse me. Well, I was inspired by like outside the box stuff, entertainment stuff, but as far as vocals, what impacted me was Ronnie Van Zant, Bon Scott, um, of course Rob Halford, early Scorpion stuff. Then it goes back to Elvis or the Beatles, and just a little bit of everything inspired me to sing or to want to be a singer or a performer rather. So it's just a little bit of everything. Glenn Campbell or Johnny Cash, it's wherever you're at, take advantage of the sound and try to get something from it. Watch a performer, watch him do his craft, get something from it. If you're open-minded enough. So I always try to be open-minded as far as performing, singing, or just doing what I do. It's a wide array of inspirations.
Well, it's really awesome to hear, man, and it definitely translates. I feel like artists who have the wider spectrum of music taste, have the most original sound, in terms of vocals or whatever it may be. Now, I just asked that because on the demos, I feel like there's a little bit of like King Diamond influence. Was that a natural thing you were doing with your voice, or was Merciful Fate and King Diamond like a big influence to you?
Well, it's a good question, and I kind of probably left him out, but that new wave of British heavy metal through the 80s was really a big impact on me for my vision of metal from Venom, Angel Witch, Merciful Fate, the Nuns Have No Fun EP. I had that, the early Iron Maiden stuff, and King Diamond, but it really goes back before that to uh Rob Halford, listen to Sinner or some of those just killer songs where he's hitting those high notes. And I go, man, I could emulate that maybe in my own way. And then, of course, Merciful Fate. And we got a lot of comparisons to King Diamond, which was really good because they were such a great band and still are. And he's such an iconic figure in our metal community. So I'll take that one. But I always try to do my own thing and keep it more, nasty savage style or nasty Ronnie style.
Yeah, yeah. Well, by the time we got to that debut record, I feel like your vocals definitely came into your own, of course, with the couple demos. Even that was very personal to you, I feel vocal wise, but you could definitely see you can definitely hear the influences on your sleeve. Now in terms of those two demos, how do you reflect on the recording and writing of both of
Well,
them?
actually, there's only one demo, the Wage, Nasty Savage Wage of Mayhem. There might be some bootleg stuff, but the one that we Well, the one that we put together and marketed and pushed and sold and sent out around to a million places, that was the Wage of Mayhem. And I mean, let's go back in some retrospective here. I'm sitting in my room, and I used to have a rock box, and I would play like Iron Maiden over here on one rock box, and on the other one, I'd record through the air, and I'd be singing, Rat Child. So my voice would go onto that. And one day, one of my friends came over. A guy goes, "Hey man, there's a band looking for a singer. You should go over there." I'm like, "Really? Damn!" And I already was jamming a little bit in this one band called the Chronic Dogs. Really weren't doing much, playing Johnny Be Good, things like that. Um, so I go, "Hell, yeah, I'll go over there." And I was with my wife at the time, who was my girlfriend, just out of high school, in her Pinto. I was coming back one night after buying a turntable. I said, "Pull over here. I'm going to try for this band." So I go in there, and I was really nervous, and I think I sang two Iron Maiden songs, Wrathchild and another one, and I sang it probably two or three times. I said, "Okay, bye." And I left. They had a female singer. They were called Nightmare. So then I didn't hear anything back from these guys, man. I'm like, damn. And then about a week and a half later, I was at a keg party, and I happened to see the guys. So I went up to them and I said, "Hey, you guys want me to be your singer or not?" And they go, "Yeah, we do. We do." I go, "Okay, I'll be over Monday with a game plan." So I go over Monday, and I go in this jam house, and I said, "All right, dude, just the band. Everybody else out. Get out." And they're like, "Who the hell is this guy?" I said, "Look, everybody else, just go outside for a few minutes. We're gonna talk some business here." They're like, "Business? Wow, this guy's for real, I guess." So I go, "Okay, sit down." I said, "This is the concept. I'm Nasty Ronnie, the wildest singer ever." I said, and we're gonna do this band called Nasty Savage. I said, "We're gonna put our money together, and we're gonna do a demo tape with four songs, so it could have a little bit of so we'll be able to sell it and market it, so it's not just one song, something. So we're gonna save our money, and the thing's gonna be called Wage of Mayhem." And I said, within 1 year, we're gonna be signed to a record company. We're gonna be touring, and we're going to be getting fan mail from all over. I said, "Are you guys in?" I said, "Is everybody in?" And they said, "Hell yes." So I knew what I had to do, man. I really wasn't even a singer. I just played one on stage, So I was the marketing fool, and we started creating concerts and cow pastures and keg parties, and charging admission and getting gig after gig, and all of a sudden, the very first show we did, and this was just the guys were Craig Huffman was the drummer, um, Ben Meyer was the guitarist, Fred Dragishin was the bass player, and then I was the singer. It was a four piece. So we we got before we did the demo, um, we changed people. So Fred stayed. Let's see, Craig was gone. We got Curtis Beeson. At the same time, we got Curtis Beeson, and then we heard about this guitarist named David Austin. So I reached out to David Austin, who was playing in a band Gangster, and I said, "Dude, we want you and Nasty Savage." So we had the personnel now to do this demo tape. So we did the demo tape, and we started doing more gigs and everything. But going back to the first show of Nasty Savage, here I've never been on stage before or anything. I did have a TV set. It was in a suburban neighborhood in Brandon, Florida, and in a neighborhood, and this guy's parents were out of town, and we set up on the side of his yard. But we went out in Fred's van earlier in the week to a couple of job sites, and we stole a bunch of plywood and wood, and we built this stage, man, on the side of the house, and had a TV set on stage, and we're getting ready to go on stage. We're getting dressed in his mom's bedroom and come out the lanai door, and here we are getting on the stage. But somehow I went back to the front street because a buddy of mine had a Harley, And I said, dude, I said, let me ride that fucker. So I cranked it up. I rode it right through the crowd. I mean, it was like Moses and the sea, like I went right to the front of the stage, looked at everybody, jumped on stage and started. So we start the show and we do about three songs. And of course, the sheriffs come. And as soon as the sheriffs get there, they get right up to the front of the stage and we stop, right? And the sheriffs are walking up, they come to the stage and we go 3, 2, 1, down, 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 breaking the law, breaking the law. So it was this defiant moment, and people go, "My God, this is so cool! They're defiant as hell." And the cop said, "Okay, man, you're going to go to jail. Shut it down. Don't do it again." And they made it clear to everybody that was there. There's probably about 60, 80 people in the front yard, and
Damn.
so the cops leave. They get right out of sight, and we start jamming again, fucking playing. They come back and totally shut it down. But what I wanted to accomplish there was creating impact and creating some hype and magnification of this new band who was not afraid to do anything it takes to get noticed. And that's how it really started, man. From there on, it just took off, and that's what happened. We got the demo tape, and now it was time to put our plan into action.
For sure. And it's so cool, how much of a visionary you were to this band and are. And yeah, I believe, I'm looking at, I have a couple sources, which I guess some of them were inaccurate. I know there were two, I believe two demos going around. There was the one, of course, the famous four-song one, and then there was, I believe it was like a rehearsal tape that was floating
Oh,
around of you guys
yeah,
too. But I
yeah. There
guess it
was.
was
I
a
mean,
boot.
the tape traders were, I always enjoyed tape traders and fanzines and supporting anybody who was pushing metal out there. Like you're old school, brother. What you're doing is so awesome. And back in the '80s, all we had was fanzines and flyers and tape trading. And because of tape trading, it got our because we had wild shit going on stage, and between the songs, you could hear me talking and saying shit. And they were like, "Man, this is cool." So yeah, the tape trading was good, and then we'd get out, every once in a while, I guess a recording here and there, and so it was all good, and every bit of it helped.
Yeah, for sure. Now, how did you guys get involved with Metal Blade?
Well, marketing the marketing was a. I figured this: you got to do the shortest cut to get to where you want to be, and here we are in a town called Brandon, Florida, when everything was happening over in California, Slayer, Metallica, all these,
Bay Area.
you know, possessed, and then the new wave British metal, and there wasn't, and they had Anthrax and stuff up on the East Coast, up in New York. So what were we gonna do, man? We're from Florida. We had to keep that, we had to create. So once the demo came out, I started sending demos to all over the place, every fanzine I could find. I'd send it to free to in the headbangers in the back of Hit Parader magazine, because I knew once one metalhead would get it, he would tell all his friends, "Look what I got, man!" And then they'd order it, and then I'd give them extra stuff, and they get more people. It was like that snowball going downhill. So we had to do that. But one thing I did right away, I contacted our local newspaper, the Brandon News, and said, "Hey, look, we're a local band and we're getting fan mail from Europe and we're in magazines and press." And they go, "Oh my God, this is great. We want to do a story." Because if you feed them, they'll understand the message. So you got to reach out and tell people your ideas. So anyway, they would send a photographer out to our show. One of them is a famous place, Ruby's Pub. There's some great tapes there with Death and Morbid Angel and Nasty Savage playing with Death there, the eve of New
Oh,
Year's Evil. So it was just a historic place that we started playing at, and it'd bring people. So here comes my photographers from the newspaper, and they're used to like taking pictures of someone presenting a check or cutting a ribbon in a grand opening, a balloon fest or something kind of boring. Now they're at the Savage show at Crazy Mayhem, and entertainment and excitement. You could feel it in the air, brother. And they were like, "Wow, this is killer." So me being the guy that I am, I would be their best friend and say, "Hey, man, let's go to the dark room, man, and develop some of these pictures." And even if we played on Saturday, I'd be saying, "Do you have the key? We can go there on Sunday." He'd go, "Yeah, yeah." So they'd be so excited. I would go into the dark room, and that's when you put the stuff in the water and brought it out, and you came up with these killer dynamic 8x10 glossies and stuff of the mayhem of photographers that were excellent and believed in what we were doing right from the get-go. And I'd sit there with them probably for 3 or 4 hours, and I'd get a stack this big, man, of just pictures. I go, "Thank you, man." I'd go home and I'd start putting those packages together, demo, killer pictures, bio, and I would provide, like, I'm a publisher now. I publish a magazine. So I understand back then, before I was a publisher, what publishers really need. And they need content, because content is king. So I would supply them, and then, they didn't have to do the research and do all this bullshit. Here they had photos, the demo, blah, blah, blah. And about 3 months later, I get these packages back, and we're on the cover of these magazines and fanzines. And then the orders would start coming in because they'd say how to get it. So that was my concept of how to do the marketing there. And I'm getting to that question you asked about Metal Blade. So what would happen is I was working a day job. I was like a shop foreman in this warehouse, making lead line drywall and lead line doors for hospitals and x-ray rooms, and we
Wow.
take them all over the state. It was a company called AFAB. My buddy's dad had this company. So I would call my mom. I'd say, "Mom, do we get any mail today?" Because it's all coming to my address at Mitchell Drive, Brandon, Florida. And my mom would go, "Oh yeah, today you got four ones here from New Jersey, New York, blah blah blah." And I go, "Oh, and here's one from Belgium." And she'd tell me what we got. And she goes, "Oh, here's one from Metal Blade Records." And I go, "Metal Blade Records? Open that up, man." And my mom was the one who told me and read it word for word from Brian Slagle, saying, "Man, you guys have stirred up a lot of commotion." And we even had a radio station from Texas, San Antonio, Tracy Barnes, sent us a reel-to-reel tape of your demo tape and said, "Man, you got to check out Nasty Savage." So he said, "We want to put you on Metal Massacre 6 with the song off the demo XXX, and then we'll want to follow it up with an album of your own." I was like, "Oh my God." So that part of the plan came into effect. And it was just a joy, because we thought, "Oh man, we hit the big time." But we did make an accomplishment by getting signed to a record company. But before that happened, these bands today want to sit back, kind of, some of them do want to sit back and wait for things to come to them, or they would think they deserve something. But what a record company wants to see, and it's a lot harder now, I think, because of the internet, social media, and everything, and just the mentality of our youth today, because what we did is we were proactive enough to go out and churn that shit up. You have to prove that you can draw in your own backyard. You have to prove that you can sell out, that you can create hype and get press and media, and go out and push it. Then a record company might recognize you. And that's what happened with us. I was doing interviews on one station in Houston called KPFT, Houston, Texas, uh, and in Baytown there, and we were doing interviews and all the time. And they go, "Man, we need to set up a show." And they set up 3 shows: San Antonio, Austin, and Houston, for us to do a demo tape tour. And we got in the van, and matter of fact, one of those photographers from the News Guy was so into it. His name was David Smith. He wanted to come with us. He goes, "Dude, I'm in." He was a great photographer, younger guy. He's like, "I am in, brother. Let me come." He goes, "I'll sleep on the floor. It don't matter." And he was there, man, and documented with these killer images. So after we did those shows at San Antonio, it was just mayhem. And it was just really cool. It was amazing to get out of your town and go make something happen. People, don't wait for it to hit you. You go create it. And that's what we did. And that's how that letter came back, because I also got, and this is just some thought for other people, to be proactive, man. I got this printout. Back then, you got these printouts with the little sticker of all these radio stations. and it was all these college underground stations that usually had a metal show. I must have had a printout of 100 or more. And every week I would send another 10 out to these guys. So you're a DJ sitting there, right? Now you get this package in the mail, and it's a demo tape, maybe some information as well. Oh, man, maybe I heard of them because I've been seeing them in all these fanzines. So what I would do, I'd take that rock box out again, and I'd cut a promo at the end of the demo because there's always a little bit of space there, and I'd say, "This is Nasty Ronnie from Nasty Savage here on KPFT, Houston, Texas. And here's a song off our demo tape, Wage of Mayhem. This is Unchained Angel right here on KPFT, Houston, Texas." So now the DJ gets that. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to play that. And then if he plays it, he's got to play the music. So it's just that common sense stuff, I think, goes a long way. It's not always, I've seen people with $1 million budgets and still not do what they needed to do with it. So it's really about being smarter and efficient. And that's how the Metal Blade thing came around.
Wow. So, like, talk about carving out your own path. There were bands struggling in the Bay Area where you guys were at the other side of the country. You know, didn't think you would, and now, you have Brian Slagle coming to your door pretty much with letters. You're getting radio play. The Bay Area, if anything, is coming to you now, which is massive. Now, in terms of the recording and writing process of the record, how did Metal Blade treat you in, like, for studio time, budget?
It was really amazing because Brian Slagle actually came to Florida to hang out at Morris Sound Studio became an iconic brand, and it still is today for metal bands to come. And Savatage recorded there, and with Dan Johnson and all that. And then we went in there because Brian Slagle said, "Yeah, let's go to Morrisound, do that." And they would give us like a budget of about 14 or $15,000. And they didn't even want to hear nothing. They didn't tell us what to do because of what we were doing and the music that we had. They trusted us. So Brian didn't hear any of it till he came down, and we were almost ready to mix. So we knew that we had to deliver, but we also knew that when you go into the studio, don't go in there to screw around and party and bring all your friends in and brag and think it's cool, because you got to take care of business. So if they gave us a 14 or $15,000 budget, we'd get it all done for about 9 grand, and then we got to split the rest of the money between the guys in the band. And then, of course, it'd come out of our royalties. I think we're
Hmm.
still paying those. No, but so we're always proactive and businesslike, and but Metal Blade was good to work with. Although our management had Curtis's dad, Adrian, was our manager, and he just had this thing in there that you're not going to sign my boys for all this time. You're going to sign them for one record at a time and all this. And I think because of that, it turned Metal Blade off eventually, because who's going to invest in someone if you don't have them signed for life or 5 records or something? So we had some bad mistakes on the business end at the beginning because we were just young and dumb, and someone else was doing it for us. And unfortunately, I think that was our downfall with Metal Blade.
Hmm. Well, you guys eventually circled back.
Yeah, we did 3 albums with them, and each one was a better deal, but we still didn't have that longevity. They wanted to sign us for like 7 albums, and we just screwed up by not
Damn.
doing that, I think. Um, but once the first album came out, we lived up to the hype because everybody had all this hype on us, and I think we lived up to that hype. And some people regard it as, a famous record of their collection, and there a lot of people were like die hard and not so die hard. So it's almost sometimes you have to acquire a taste for it because it's not sounding like every other band. And one thing about it, Fred Dregeshan, wrote so much of the first album, and he was like this forward musician thinker, sort of like Steve Harris or somebody. So he brought that sound, and then David Austin's guitar, and then Ben's guitar. As far as the writing of the music, man, I never had anything to do with that. I left it up to the band, because those guys play the music. I trusted them, and I just gave them my inspiration and passion, and I just loved what they were doing, and got to feed off of it. So that's one thing, man. I have to honor the players, man, who created the music and the tandem guitar stuff, and it was just it was amazing time to see it all before our eyes, and I think it went by so fast. Sometimes you don't even take it all in. So now, 41 years later, I'm really taking it in and understanding even more about what we're doing, but it's still up to the guys to write the music. So it's just
Wow.
it's an incredible time really to look back at the body of work but to where it's going now at this crossroads we're in.
Yeah, Nasty Savage is such a cool and iconic history, and I know without you, there might not be bands like Obituary. Um, how do you reflect on the story of giving them advice on starting Obituary?
Well, I mean, I I thought this, man. We're in Florida. You got all that stuff going on up in the East Coast of New York. There started to be more bands coming out, and then all the California stuff. Everybody thought, oh, you can't be heavy and from Florida. That's like swampland or something. So I was out to create not only Nasty Savage, but I felt that if I could bring other people to the table, not only would it let's say, hey, Nasty help these guys or those guys, which wasn't that important to me. It was more what they were going to do to help our scene, to help the movement, to help everything that had to happen to put Tampa Bay on the map, because we're already getting there where it became the heavy metal capital of the world. Then it changed into the death metal capital of the world. Yeah, I was at home one day at my mom and dad's house where I lived on that Mitchell Drive, where the letters used to come to that 109 box, and and all of a sudden my mom goes, "There's two boys at the door. They want to talk to you." And I've told this story before. And I go to the door, and these two kids on bananas, I mean, on Stingray bicycles with the banana seats and the chopper handlebars. And they go, "Hey, what's up, man?" They go, "Hey, are you Nasty Ronnie?" I said, "Yeah." And they go, "Well, we're Donald and John Tardy, and we want to know how to start a band." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I go, "Really?" I said, "You guys came to the source of someone who's a marketing fool at heavy metal and creating hype and magnification of a products." I said, "Man, you guys are brilliant." I said, "I love it." I said, "Let's go to Lithia Springs, this county park over here, and let's throw the frisbee for about 5 hours to get in my Chevelle. Let's go." And we did. We came back, man. Those boys were ready to go, and that's when they started Executioner, and went on to start Obituary, and they just left yesterday on a big tour. Amon Ra and Cannibal Corpse and Obituary is doing I don't know, 2 months out across America, and so and then there was bands like there's a guy Ed Aborn, and he was in a band called Siren, and they were around in the early days too. We'd have all these bands around, and a lot of people would never want to help anybody, or that's how people are. But what I thought was great is one day Ed Aborn called me up or came to my house. He goes, "Hey Ron, how are you getting in all these magazines, man? How are you doing this?" Because it was competition. And I'm like, "Dude, I reached out, I researched, I have all these." I had like a big thing of I had a big envelope of contacts. So I said, "Ed, you want the contacts? Here you go." And I gave him my contacts. I said, because what I felt, if you really want to do it, do it. Now I just gave you the ball, run with it. Score some touchdowns, man, and do that, and you'll really gain my respect. So that's what he did. Next thing you know, I started seeing Siren and the Siren and here, so it was all that camaraderie stuff that as in a leadership role or visionary, you got to help others, because sometimes karma will come back to you in a good way. But if not, it's still the right thing to do, man, because of that, things have happened that they've given me in the past. And same thing with Obituary. But at the same time, there was this one fanzine called Guillotine, and they were these two metal dudes from Orlando, and they came to one of our shows at the London Victory Club. And when they did, they brought two other guys with them, and one was named Chuck Schudler, and Rick Ross, the two dudes that started Death. But they weren't in a band back then. They were just headbangers, man. And they were literally bashing their head on the stage and became instant Nasty Savage fans because of the impact, the impact that you'd feel when back when we're 18, 19, full of spunk, full of funk, and just going nuts. It was an impactful show to see, I guess, because it was just pure non-controlled mayhem, you know. And they were there. And the next thing you know, they came to one of our practices and they go, "Oh yeah, we started this band, Mantis, and let's play a song." And all of a sudden, they played this stuff. I'm like, "Holy shit, man! That's like a whole new kind of music, man. It's like total death, like holy shit." And here it started. But at the same time, after we recorded at Morrisound, bands like Creator, Agent Steel, Destruction, Sepultura, so many bands would come over and record at Morrisound recording studios. And it was because they loved the production that we were doing. And because of that, there was a guy named Scott Burns who was an assistant for us. Scott would just, back then, you'd have to change the tapes, three-quarter inch tapes, and you'd have to, switch them, put them backwards, whatever, take them off, put the new ones on, make the coffee, whatever. He was an assistant to Jim Morris and his brother. And Scott all of a sudden became an iconic. He just released a book about his history of death metal, and it really took another turn for our area to become the death metal capital of the world, with Obituary, Deicide, Morbid Angel, Nocturnus, Cannibal Corpse. Man, there's so many other bands, the Siren guys, and there was so many bands. Can't even remember all of them, but there's so many of them that did and still say. Atheist is another one. Would say, "Man, we were inspired by Nasty Savage," and that it really means a lot when they give you those props, and don't forget kind of some of their inspirations. And Chuck, they were wearing Nasty Savage shirts in their early days, and Obituary 20 years later put us on this video, 10,000 Ways to Die. It was an animated video of included Nasty Savage in it, and if you haven't seen it, you got to check it out. And then the zombies come in and their video starts, but it's got over 6 or 7 million views. So because of that, it helped Nasty Savage, I think, get reached out to newer metalheads that maybe didn't even know who we were. So then they wrote a book, and there's a pretty big chapter of the inspiration of Nasty Savage. So those guys were just, I respect them so much, man, because they run it like a real business, man. And then they're very calculating. Any decision they make, man, it's so cool to see. And the work ethic of a guy like Terry Butler, who's in these other bands, and they manipulate these tours and trips. And I don't know how they keep track of the logistics of this stuff, man. But, it's crazy. So while we're on the topic of Obituary, I wanted to reach out. We're at this crossroads with this new album. I'm like, what do I do to bring the past back? Well, let's record at Morrisound Recording Studio. So we did that. I went out and found Vandekar's grandchild, the guy who painted our album covers, to work on some artwork. We got the artwork. We found some. Vandekar's been dead for years. So I got that. So then I said, you know what? I want to reach out to Obituary, my good friend Donald, and tell him I want them to be part of this album. And I said, Donald, I would want it redo from the demo, which is Sabbath. And I want you and your brother to be on it. And Donald goes, hell, I'll play the drums, bro. Man, that'd be killer. And he goes, I'll talk to John, see if I can get him. And, after talking to John back and forth, he wasn't sure how it would work. I said, John, don't worry. Whatever you want to do, you just do, and we'll make it work. So I just got the files, and that they did it right before they left, and we brought that back. So it's all coming together from the past to the future, and that's where we're at with that. So that was because of what we did in the early days and got people to actually, be inspired by Nasty Savage, I guess. But
which turned
you know,
into a whole scene. The as you said, the death metal capital of the world. You planted the scenes that became the seeds that became this massive movement, let alone a scene. I feel like it was more of a death metal movement. It's very,
well,
very amazing.
how I see it is they're watching us and they see what we've done and in their face with the crazy. It had to take another step to an extreme. And then you heard Venom and Possessed. So they're calculating this new blood and these new kids that are 10 years younger, 20, 15 years younger. And they're going, what are we going to do? So it was like a natural thing to progress into extreme. And that's what they did. They created this extreme. And I remember just after the demo days, a guy named David Vincent, it was before Morbid Angel, I think, but he was with Gork Records, and he was wanting to sign us before we got signed to Metal Blade. I was actually talking to Dave Vincent about signing us to this label, Gork Records, and so we might have did what we did, but each one of these bands had their own leadership and their own vision to be successful on their own mark. Deicide's another one. I didn't know it, but Fred left the band after the first album. Then we got Dezo. Dezo left after Indulgence. So then we had to get a bass player for Abstract Reality. I never went to the auditions. Again, I left it up to the musicians to pick who they wanted to jam with. David Austin is brilliant. He knows who to jam with. And Ben, and Curtis. So I just left it up to them. I didn't know it. And then one day, we did this reunion show for Curtis, and all these death bands and everybody came together to help this benefit for Curtis because he has a brain tumor. And Glenn Benton comes up to me. He goes, "Hey, motherfucker." I go, "Yeah, what's up, man?" He goes, "I'm pissed off at you. Fuck you." I go, "What?" He goes, "You didn't pick me to be your bass player, man." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I tried out for your bass player when you guys were looking for an Abstract Reality days, but you picked Chris Morehouse." I go, "Dude, I didn't even know that." I go, "Holy shit, that might have changed the course of heavy metal." And Glenn Benton might have never um, burned a cross in his forehead, or some shit like that. That was incredible,
Wow, what a
man.
crossover.
Yeah, and then like 25 years later, he calls me. I see him at the flea markets because I go to these flea markets a lot. And Glenn's always out there at this one Webster, and he collects knives and daggers and shit.
I
So we
believe it.
always stop and talk. And we talked one day, and then he called me up later. He goes, "Hey, man," he goes, "we're going on a U.S. tour." This was a couple of years ago. He goes, "Well, how about Nasty Savage coming and playing with us?" I go, "Man, that would be cool as hell. How many shows?" It was like 30 shows or 40 shows. And my wife's going, "You can't do that." She goes, "You're too old for that." I go, "Baby, that's rock and roll." So, so anyway, so when I go, "Whoa, you guys got a tour bus?" He goes, "Oh, hell no." He goes, "We travel in a van and take showers at truck stops and stuff."
Oh my
I'm like,
God.
"Oh, okay." I said, "And how much is the pay?" And I said, "Yeah, that's not going to work for us, brother." But it was just funny that we had that opportunity, and it's so everything comes circle back. That's why you don't burn bridges. You try to help people. But you know what Dave Vincent, Morbid Angel, Death, they built a foundation, Obituary, that I'm so proud of, because there was a while in the 90s where we weren't doing anything. We were broken up and whatever. We played a show here and there. So I was watching what was going on, and I'm very proud of what's happened to our metal. And there's right now there's a ton of new bands out there that's just kicking ass and playing hard. But are they going to take that next step to take it out of Tampa Bay? And that's it's a lot harder now with all the digital and all the bullshit that you have to deal with. And you know,
Yeah.
you just have to deal with it. But man, Tampa Bay became a mecca not only because of Morrisound recording, but because of the bands that did it. Obituary. I mean, so proud of all these bands that have done that. I'm just a part of the past, and I'm trying to hang on to what we got. But these new guys and all the new bands and the death movement and all this stuff. Chuck turned out to be a dynamic person and philosophical, and he really wasn't just into death. He was inspired by bands like Nasty Savage, Watchtower, and he would say that in interviews. So it was just been a pleasure to see the growth happen. And if we help plant that seed, I'm proud of that. But I'm not going to take total credit for it all, because everybody had to do their own job.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Now you brought up Indulgence. How long did this record did the band take to write the material on this album?
It seemed like we were always writing new songs, and David would say, "Hey, man, I got one of the coolest phone calls I ever got from David Austin was before the demo tape. He got in the band. He was wanting to write a song or something. And he brought up the Morgue, and that was one of his songs. He had another one called Vigilante that was really cool. Never got on. He was on a couple of live tapes. I think it's on this new. We redid the demo tape, and Vigilante's on that one. Um,
Nice.
but it's a really cool song. But anyway, he calls me up. He goes, "Hey, man," he goes, "I got this idea for a song." I said, "Really? What?" He goes, "This is the title, XXX." I go, "Oh shit, I love it." So those are some of those memories you have. It's like wow. But as far as Indulgence, so here we were. We did the first album. People liked it. We lived up to the hype pretty much of the demo and all the fanzines and all the stuff and the live shows. But maybe we weren't quite heavy enough. Now the death stuff was coming in, so we were maybe getting pushed, with a new stream of new mainstream. Maybe we just weren't as heavy as we should have been, we thought. So we tried to make it a little more progressive, a little more heavy. And I tried to change my vocals a little more because, like the first time, I really didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't. And so I tried to nail it down a little bit more. And, it was definitely a progression. And each album was a progression. But as far as writing songs, they came natural because we knew we had to. And we'd practice and practice and practice, because we didn't have, not a lot of us had jobs. And, we were really focused on doing that. We did have jobs, but we worked around that stuff. So, and when we were ready, Metal Blades, okay, let's do another one. Let's do another one. And they were, and the Indulgence album got over really good. We redid Triple X, put it on that one, and some great songs on there. Matter of fact, we're playing Stabbed in the Back off of that album. Um, so yeah, that, we always had new songs. And again, with Indulgence, we had a different bass player, which was Dezo. And Dezo was a younger kid, and he had a song that he wrote called Inferno. And that we recorded that, and it gave us a different sound as well.
Did Metal Blade give you like an upgrade for recording time?
You know what? I don't remember, but I think it was kind of close to that, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit more. But they knew we took care of business, so um, they were always good about that. They knew they were going to get a product back in timely manner, and and get everything they need to do it with.
So when did you make that leap into, I believe it was Rotten Records? Am I correct?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was after Abstract Reality came out in '88 because we toured Europe with that, and we have four songs on there. You Snooze, You Lose. We did Unchained Angel, um, Aromantic Vertigo, and the song Abstract Reality. And here we were in a really state of being tight as hell, coming up with some killer music. And I told Melboy, let's just do an EP and get that done so we could use it for on tour. And they said, oh, great idea. So we went and did that, toured Europe. And I mean, we just lit up Europe, man. It was like they were ready for Nasty Savage. And the first show was in Denmark. And we just pretty much annihilated the people because we're just so tight. And that's where we actually did we played the shows in Poland behind the Iron Curtain at the time. We did three shows, and we got to this one big arena, and they had this gigantic Nasty Savage banner, like you could put it over a house for a fumigation. It was gigantic, man, and we toured with Exhumer and Autumncraft, and it was a really fun time. Um, but one
Wow.
real quick story about that is
Go for it.
um, when we played in Poland, four shows in Poland, they were very oppressed. You had to get stamps for food, you had to get stamps for gas. and we played with this band Wolf Spider in Poland. And they played all three shows with us. And after the last show, I said, "Hey man, call those guys in our dressing room." And they came in our dressing room, and I said, "This is for you." We had all our Polish money on the table, and we pushed it. I pushed it over to the side of the table. I said, I didn't push it off the table. I just pushed it towards them. I said, "This is for you." And they were like, "What?" I said, "We want to give you this because, we honor you guys, and, we
Wow.
respect you. And here, and man, I think everything I've ever done, that was one of the coolest moments ever in my heavy metal history, because we were able to give someone, which a metal band that brought us together, people, because of the music. That's why we're here together, because this thing called heavy metal, and we're in their country behind the Iron Curtain, and they're oppressed. We're not. And we gave them our money, man, and the looks on their faces, and that's what it's about, man. And it's just a great moment for us, and so that was a good thing about the tour. But every show was unbelievable.
Yeah, I think metal out of every genre ever has such a close community. It really does. Like every pit I've seen, anyone who tumbles, everyone will like stop, help them up. Even just people like, being nice to each other and just support. The amount of support in this community is so unbelievably amazing. And I hope, your actions inspired so many people because I can't imagine them not. That's such an amazing thing to do. Now, I want to touch on a penetration point. This was with Rotten Records.
Yeah.
What was that transition like into the new label
You
there?
know, it was really cool at the time because, we're like big brother, kind of pushing us around and holding us back and not wanting to negotiate or whatever happened, I think. And we lost our manager at the time, and we yeah, he really wasn't our manager anymore, and we were trying to do it all ourselves. So I was friends with Spike from DRI, and Spike was part of this record company, Rotten Records, with a guy named Ron, somebody out of California. Anyway, they were like, "Dude, let's sign Nasty Savage," and it was like, "Hell yeah, we did it!" And we recorded it, and now we had a bass player, a monster bass player named Richard Bateman, who actually passed away. May he rest in peace, because he is just the kindest soul ever. But that dude was a monster on the bass, and he together with David and Ben, just wrote the most twisted album. It was like, "Okay, Ron, sing to this here." And I thought they were just fucking with me about giving me this crazy shit, but it was still structured properly and in a way I could sing. So that's what happened. We just distorted Fanatic, Penetration Point, um, God, Irrational, Human Factor. I mean, all these cool songs came out of that album. Um, and then we toured with DRI, who are still the road dogs of the world in history, man. Those guys have never stopped. This was like 93. We did 60 shows in 65 days with them, from LA,
Damn.
Chicago, Detroit. I mean, every night we were in a different town. We'd wake up in the back of this van, and we'd be in the back of a hall or somewhere. We're like, "Oh, we're here." And we'd go in, and it was just unbelievable, man, because I'd be on stage and go, "By the way, we're looking for a place to stay tonight. Anybody's got a place? Well, we'll stay with you." And man, we were staying with the people who loved us the most. Man, it could be a cold slab floor in South Central LA, or it could be in Texas. They go, "Well, my daddy's an oil tycoon, and we've got a big ass estate and we got a big old ranch. If you'd like to come stay at my house of oil millionaires." And then we went from one extreme to the other, because I've wined and dined with kings and queens, but I slept in alleys and ate pork and beans, baby. And I mean, we had a great adventure with our fans, and it was always cool, because then when you went back to these towns, those people were always there to hook you up with whatever you needed. And we had a great relationship with our fans. And but that tour was amazing because we were so tight. You know, we were so tight and just totally kicked ass. And here we are playing with Sick of It All and DRI. So we also had to come across a lot of hardcores and punks. And at the same time, DRI was doing this album called Crossover. So they were trying to get more of a metal crowd where the hardcore fans were a little more pissed off at them, the real hardcore ones, because they thought they were selling out. So there was a lot of adversity on that tour that they had to deal with, the media and the punk rock kids. And then, you know, we had to deal with you know, some of the politics of being in a punk show. And you got Sick of It All, who's straight edge. So they brought the straight edge hardcore punks. Then DRI was X kind of punk, but now still punk rock, but still thrash now. And then here us, full fledged metal. We got along
Theatrical
great
too.
with yeah, you know, so we were turned on to a lot of new people at the same time, that's what was great about it. You know, is Spike and those guys took care of us. They put all our gear in their truck. Their sound people did all of our sound. We had a killer sound every night, and man, it was just awesome. It was really cool. One thing about it too is 60 shows in 65 days. I mean, it was all over, all across Canada, everywhere. But when you're in Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, and all these big cities, when you load in, they always had pizza, you know, when you load in. So we had the best pizza every day from the best pizza shops in these cities. And it was amazing, man. It was just so cool.
You probably never had pizza ever again after that. You know, just had the best of the best throughout the world, the ultimate pizza tour.
Yeah, it's true, you know, but
Uh-huh.
it always tasted so good because we were always so damn hungry back then.
That definitely helps. Now,
Yeah, man.
how do you reflect on the material on Penetration Point? I think it's kind of an underrated record from the band.
Yeah, you know, it's it was a progression for me. To me, it was like, and to this day, people go, "Why don't you play a lot of Penetration Point live? You know, play this, play that." I look at it like this, you know, it's like your children. You love them all equally, you know, and you can't pick favorites because you love your kids. But when I look back at the body of work from the first album, Indulgence, Abstract to Penetration Point, I think it was like some of that might have really went over people's heads, but some people might have really loved it even more. And I think at that point we didn't get as much media and press. We were getting older, and after that tour, we all kind of broke up, you know, after that. And so I don't know if there's a lot on that. The record company really didn't do a lot for us or promotion wise. And I think that was pretty much it for quite a while until '05 happened and we did the Psycho album.
Yeah, or you got to return to Metal Blade as well, which must have been nice.
No. It wasn't Metal Blade.
Oh, well, what label?
It was called Crooked Records. He was doing stuff with Gardy Lou, with Ben and those guys, and he did stuff with I don't know. He did stuff with Ben and Gardy Lou and somebody else, Lowbrow. And then so I finally go, oh, I need to talk to this guy. So I talked to him, and he goes, I'd love to do another Nasty Savage album. I go, man, that's killer. It's been all these years, 15, 20 years. Let me talk to everybody. And he came up with $40,000 he gave us, and we split that. And then he paid for the production of Psycho at the same time. So David lived in,
Wow.
yeah, he was a diehard fan, man. And then there was a guy, and we recorded at the Red Room in Tampa, Mark Prater's place. So it was a little step down from Morrisound. And then there was a guy named Paul Curcio, and his name is on the first Metallica album as a producer. And I happen to know this guy, Paul Curcio, from this deal I was doing with Born to Ride. And he was part of this conglomerate company that was going to buy out Born to Ride and all this stuff. And never happened. But we got to talking and stuff. And I'm like, you're Paul Curcio? Yeah, I'm Paul. So I go, hell, we hired Paul to come in and produce this record, Psycho. So we're in the studio and we do the drum tracks, working on all that. And every time we ask Paul, what do you think? He goes, that's great. Great. I'm like, dude, is this guy going to give us any input or make us sound better? And he never did. So we ended up firing him out like on the third day. We said, dude,
Wow.
I'm sorry, brother, but you're not giving us the input we were expecting. So we ended up producing it ourselves, and Psycho Psychos is just another progression because Richard again was on that. Curtis was the drummer, and we had Ben and Dave as well. And Dave lived in Tennessee, so it was weird. We kind of all came together, maybe a couple of practices right before we went into the studio, but pretty much everybody did their own stuff separately until we went into the studio to do it. And then I reached out to Chris Jericho, who's an iconic wrestler, performer. You know, he's in Fozzy. He's just an unbelievable guy. Podcasts and Hollywood stuff and voiceovers. And he was a big Savage fan. And through the guy I talked about in Siren, Ed Aborn, way back when Dezza was in the band, so it was the Indulgence days. He called me up and said, "Hey, Chris Jericho wants to meet you. He wants to have dinner. Can you meet at Outback Steakhouse in Brandon at this day?" I said, "Hell yeah, I'll be there." So I went there, and Chris was saying, "Yeah, man, I used to play volleyball in Canada, and I'd listen to Nasty Savage. Dude, I love Nasty Savage." And he says, I go, "Yeah, with Dezo." And our band, he goes, "Nope, Dezo Itzavon Bartha the third." I mean, he even knew like the guys' names and shit. So when we went to do this album, Psycho Psycho, I reached out to him and said, "Man, I'd love for you to come in and sing with me on Savage Desire." So, of course, being the professional he is, he came into the studio and actually, recorded that with us. And it was a pleasure working with
Wow.
him. Yeah.
So after, was it after Psycho Cycle you got involved with Universal Studios?
Let me see. So no, it was before that. It was
It's
right
before
after
that.
like 90. It was like 92, 90, 93. I was already starting to mess with it when I was still in Nasty Savage. And then once we broke up after that long tour, that's when I started running my own wrestling shows here. I was already doing wrestling off and on, but I got on Championship Wrestling from Florida with Kevin Sullivan, the Prince of Darkness, in his heyday when he was all over the TV. I was on the intro of Championship Wrestling from Florida with Kevin Sullivan, the Prince of Darkness. I took him to Vandikar's house so he could film there. I go, "You got to meet this guy, man." And when he did, he put me on the front of the show. So when everybody, the wrestling community saw that, it was easy for me to open doors. And I started going to these wrestling schools. I started working as a manager. Then all of a sudden, I became a promoter. I was running my own shows at the this place called the Harbor Club. And that's when a guy from Universal Studios came up and goes, "Hey, Nasty Ronnie, I want to talk to you." His name was Eddie Mansfield. He said, "I'm starting up at Universal Studios, Soundstage 23, and I'd like you to work with me." And I said, "Hell yeah." But he didn't know what he was getting because what I did, I brought talent every week from from Tampa to Orlando, as many guys I could fit in my car, and I'd give them tryouts. And Eddie was so smart, he'd put these gimmicks on them and, turn them into heroes and villains. And then we started the IWF wrestling. And that's, because I was his right hand man, I was able to get a lot of TV time, and I was one of the bookers, and I became an office guy, and so I was in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the office, doing promotions. Just I had the Mongolian Stomper, the Possessor, the Nuclear Assassin, and I had the Nasty Organization. I created that whole thing with Nasty Ronnie, and I had Twisted Sister, and so I learned a lot back then about it. And I really, man, when I look back at some of the stuff I did, I wish I would have known better or known more how to really do it like I do now. Man, if I had a chance to work with a WWE or somebody, I think I could be an asset in the creative development so much, and even on camera if I needed to. But I mean, I think I could really help a wrestling company now with some angles, vision, ideas, and booking, and just talent relations. I mean, that's my biggest. It's one of the biggest thing I would love to do still is get a job like that.
Yeah, yeah. You said you were wrestling on and off. When did you start?
Well, in the early '80s when Nasty Savage started, that's when I had my eye on. I was at a Judas Priest concert in Lakeland, and I had backstage passes. And I was backstage, and I had some T-shirts I was going to give to the band, Nasty Savage shirts. And all of a sudden, I see the wrestlers back there, and one of them was Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan at the time was the biggest villain, and he was the Prince of Darkness. He's everybody thought he was satanic and all this, evil, paint his face up and just crazy. People hang around guys with the snakes and Habudadeen and just way out on left field stuff. So I loved it because it was right parallel with what we were doing, kind of. So I went to the matches in Tampa, and I was like, where they filmed the TV show. And I got there and I'm knocking on the door. I said, I want to meet Kevin Sullivan. And they're like, yeah, right. Okay, sure. I'll tell him you're here. And then he never came out, never came out. All of a sudden, everybody in the whole place left. And I'm still standing there at the door. And he finally
Wow.
comes out. He puts his head out. He goes, sorry, brother, I can't talk now. He goes, come Tuesday night here and I'll be wrestling there. Maybe we can talk. So I'd go there. Same thing happened. He blew me off again. I'm like, shit. He goes, come to the Sarasota, Robarts Arena. So I go to Robarts Arena and I get to talk to him for a couple of minutes. And usually people would quit then. I said, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to be persistent. And I went one more place. I said, look, man, we're playing Saturday night at Ruby's Pub in Tampa. If you guys can make it after your show, come and see what I do. You'll know, you'll understand where I'm at and what I can bring to you guys. So all of a sudden we're on Ruby's Pub and I'm watching the mayhem go down and it's like waves of thrashers and stage. It was just amazing back then what was going on. And all of a
Wow.
sudden, the left of my eye, I see them walking, Kevin Sullivan, Mayha Singh, Purple Haze, Sir Oliver Humperdinck, and they go to the back. So I commanded the crowd, and they saw what was going on there. They'd never seen nothing like it. Next day, he calls me. He goes, "Brother, come over to my place. I want to have lunch with you." So I went to South Tampa. Went to their. They had some apartment at the time, and he said, "Dude, I want to work with you. I want to do a lot of stuff with you. I really like what you're doing." And I pretty much said, "Told you," but I didn't say that. I said, "Yes, sir." Whatever. So
Uh-huh.
he goes, "But I do want to ask you a question." I go, "So this is what he really wanted out of me." I go, "What was that? What's that, man?" He goes, "You know those flash bombs that you have on stage?" He goes, "We're doing this big show in Daytona at the Dan Cannon Auditorium." He goes, "Do you think it's the first event in this building too?" He goes, "We're doing a triple chance cage match with Blackjack Mulligan, and it's the main event." He goes, "I want you to be part of my entourage. I want you to come out to the ring with a Buddha Dean with the snakes and wear your Nasty Savage gimmick." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Can you bring the flash bombs and light them off when we go out to the ring?" So I said, "Hell yeah." And I did that. And I think it actually was one of the first pyrotechnic show at a wrestling match. And this was in the,
Wow.
in the 80s. And we did it and he was all happy. And it started a great relationship. And then again, so after that, I said, "Dude, you got to check out Vandikar's house." I took there and I just started taking more advantage of my ideas and value that I was giving them to make me more of a valuable person all around and to get my foot in the door. Because then I'd go to these little wrestling shows around Tampa and they'd say, "Oh, hell yeah, we'll book you, we'll book you." And I started working with Boris Malenko, the Malenko School of Wrestling. So it all had a kind of a plan that kind of worked, and it was good timing. One other thing that happened at the early days of Nasty Savage, MTV just came out. Remember? You remember when MTV? I don't know if you're old enough.
I was born in 98.
Oh shit, man! So you missed that. This is the '80s.
I
So
missed
so
all
you,
of this.
your soul is old school, though, brother. I can tell. But man, I used to get my studs and leather at this place in the mall called Shalimar. It was an southeastern guy owned it. His name was Jay. And I buy these wrists. I had all that shit. If you see old pictures of me, I've got all of it. And I'd buy. He goes, "Hey, Ron." He goes, "I'm filming a commercial. I'd like for you to be in the commercial. Would you come and bring maybe a girl and another guy, and you come be in the TV commercial?" I said, "Sure, man, I'll do it." So we go there. I go there, and we do this modeling shit, walking around with the stuff on. And then he goes, "Hey, I want you to say something at the end of the commercial." I go, "Okay." So I grabbed the samurai sword off the wall and I held it up here and I go, "This is Nasty Ronnie from Nasty Savage, and I get all my studs and leather at Shalimar." And that was it. Next thing you know, MTV comes out And that commercial's playing, I swear to God, 20 times a day for weeks. And it was right when our demo came out. So it couldn't have till this day, people say, I remember that commercial, man. So it was another one of those, points along the way that kind of happened for reason, maybe, because it was
Mhm.
destined or just, I mean, everybody was watching MTV back in the early, it was the only, it was the coolest thing out.
Wow. And correct me if I'm wrong. You guys did like a commercial for like a hair salon too.
We did.
Yeah.
It was in the Brandon Mall. It was in the Brandon Mall, and we used to get our hair cut there. And they said, we're going to do a commercial, and we were wondering maybe we'd do a concept with Nasty Savage. So I go, okay, and I wrote the script. I had this guy come in with a limousine, and each guy got out of it, and they say, "This is incredible! It's awesome! It's this!" And then I come out and go, "It's Nasty Ronnie," and I bet you wonder what all the excitement is about. I said, "Well, let's just go find out." And he goes, "All the excitement is all the Nasty Savages getting their hair done at Flair Family Hair Care, Brandon Mall." And it just kept going. It was just cool as hell, and that was another thing that was really cool, and that's got so much attention through the years. I think some like hair group that does hair, they got all these schools of people that do hair stuff, and there's all these different um what do you call it, groups, Facebook groups, social media groups. And one of them found this commercial and they were making a big deal out of it, how their genre, which is hair, and heavy metal did this, and they were just making fun of us and stuff. It was really funny. So it still has legs today, that commercial. And it was me being a producer back then. I was writing script.
Yeah, yeah, very, very busy still to this day. We know there's a new record in the works. Now it's almost been 2 decades since the last album. What made you guys want to be like, you know what, let's put out another Nasty Savage record?
Well, it was always on the agenda. And, then we, after Ben left, we picked up a guy named Pete Sykes. Curtis was gone. We picked up Jim Coker, who actually played in the '05 or something and Bang Your Head. So he went to Germany with us there. And then Pete got in the band. Richard quit the band. And we got Scott Carino to do these gigs because we were doing these one-off gigs all the time. And David Austin was still there. So it was me and Dave were the original members. And uh so we always had this thing that we want to do this, and we actually wrote some new songs. We went in this studio, a different studio, and wrote 4 songs. We were going to record it, and we did the drums and the bass and rhythms, and Dave just kind of lost interest and didn't never really put it out. We were funding it ourselves, so that made a difference. Going back to my friends in Siren, they signed to this band. They signed to this label from Germany, FHM record label. And I was like, damn. And Frank, the guy who owns the record company, has a house in Florida down in Cape Coral, and he rides Harleys. So every time he'd come to Florida, we'd try to get away, and I'd take him on these back roads all around Florida and have a great time. I never discussed anything about music really with him, but he was a fan, so he'd watch us play, and he came to a couple of our shows when we played with Siren and did a cool thing with them. And then, so now we got David in the band and all this stuff, and now he released the Siren album, Oblivion, another band from here. And so now we're going to go on a ride. And this was about less than a year ago. So he's in town again. So I'm like, now we have this new energy. I didn't want to have to shop a demo and all that bullshit and all. So me and him went on like 200-mile ride, and we stopped at he spent the night here. I made him this big ass breakfast, and then we got up in the morning because he rode in. So I said, yeah, you can stay at my house. Made this big breakfast. We hit the road, and now we're at this Beef O'Brady's in this little town up on 17 on the other side of the state. And that's where I started telling him, I said, you know what? We should just do a Nasty Savage album. We'll do it on your label. I don't want to fuck around and shop it. I said, it's going to be good, man. You just trust me. And he agreed. He agreed to give us a budget to record, and not a big budget, but at least it's something that we didn't have to shop and put money into a demo, and that's how it came about, you know. And so all my guys were thinking, yeah, we're never going to do this because Dave said we're never going to do it. But when I was able to tell these guys what I'm working on and this is going to happen, they got excited. And you know, they're road dogs, man. They're great guys and they're totally committed. But at the same time, Scotty, our bass player Scott Carino, has a really bad back. He's going through a lot of pain and meds, you know, and I think it really screwed him up. And we go on tour, he'd come, but you know, he'd have a hard time. And but then sometimes he would be very hard to get in touch with. Like here we are now. We have a record deal opportunity. We got this show coming up in Tulsa that it was really coming up, and I had to make sure. And then he's not answering, so I even had to do a welfare check on his house and send the police. He lives in Seminole, away, about an hour away, to make sure he wasn't dead or something, you know. So he did. Then he came to practice. And that's when he finally told, you know, at practice, he took his gear home. And I thought, God, that's kind of weird. And then we still were trying to find out, Scott, what's going on? What's going on? Finally, he quit. He said, yeah, I'm just going to have to step back. And I'm like, holy shit. So now I really didn't know what we're going to do. We have the record company ready to do something, need a commitment. We have a contract to sign. Who's going to sign it? Then we have this gig coming up in Tulsa. And we're like, 3 months away or something like that, a couple of months away. So I put a post on Facebook saying, hey, I have a new project. If I had I said, a new project looking for a bass player. Who's the baddest bass player around? And, you know, just to see what happened. And, shoot, what's the guy played in Death? He's been in all these bands. Oh, shit, I can't remember. James Murphy. He played
Oh,
in Death.
yeah.
Testament.
Nice.
Yeah, I just met him at a gas station in Lakeland. This dude came out with his long gray beard, and he had this cool cat shirt on, but he had a metal hat on or something. I go, dude, you play metal? He goes, you like to listen to heavy metal? He goes, hell yeah. He goes, fuck it. Are you Nasty Ronnie? I go, yeah. He goes, I'm James Murphy. I go, oh shit, how you doing, man? And it was really cool that we just met in the middle of nowhere. So anyway, that's where we became
Wow.
Facebook friends. So anyway, I put that post out, and James, he was one of the first guy that responded. He goes, he goes, contact Kyle Skoll. I go, okay, well, shit, if James recommends him, I think we might have something here. So I reached out to Kyle, and Kyle got right back to me and said, oh, man, I'd love to jam with you guys. In the meantime, Pete had a couple other people we're going to try out from a post that I sent to him. So Kyle comes over. He goes, and I go, just get with Pete. Pete. As soon as he tried out, he goes, yeah, man, this dude's going to be awesome. And he was already scheduled to go on a tour with Astronomica, and he also plays with with um, Nocturnus. He's their new bass player. I'm like, holy shit. I said, bottom line, he was back like 4 days or 3 days before we went to Tulsa. We had a couple of practices before that. We gave him the new music, and you know, he's a solid guy, professional. And he
Wow.
he told us, he goes, dude, he goes, the guy, our singer, and they're doing like Crimson Glory stuff. And the Wade Black, the singer, would say, hey, and our bass player is also in Nasty Savage. And he said after he got off stage, people would mob him, go, Nasty Savage, man, we love Nasty Savage. They were in Greece. So I'm like, oh, that's cool, man. So anyway, he was fired up. Turns out that Kyle actually sent me this thing that I sent him. He ordered a Nasty Savage T-shirt from the fan club, and I sent it to him. So he was a fan, a real Nasty Savage fan to begin with. Grew up in Tampa Bay. Anyway, it was just a pleasure to get him. He got on board. Like one door shut, another one opened right up, man. So these guys were all ready to go. Frank from the record company said, let's do this. Next thing you know, Pete's got 4 songs. Dave Orman's got 4 songs. And
Nice.
then we're doing Witches Sabbath, and we also have an instrumental song called The Sixth Finger. So yeah, man. And now we went in, we did drum tracks. Drum tracks sound incredible. Morris Sound Recording Studio. We did the rhythm tracks and the bass. So now we have to do leads. And and the vocals, and we'll be doing those next month. And
Wow, so this is
man,
all wrapping up.
yeah, we were supposed to be done by March because the key is to have it all ready for Frank, who's the German label, who's be set up at Keep It True Festival in October. And that's we're playing that. We're playing that in October, and he's going to have a big merchandise booth and be a great way, a direct market to sell some records and meet and greet and all that kind of stuff. So
Have you
we're
announced
still
have you announced like a title for this record?
yeah. The title's going to be Jeopardy Room,
Very
and
exciting.
and I was able to find a Vandekar, a cool Vandekar painting, like I said,
Yeah,
to bring it
yeah.
all back, and Jeopardy Room fit that probably the best out of the all the titles. Um,
Awesome. Awesome.
I'll give you a couple of titles of this album.
Yeah.
Um, Operation Annihilate, Aztec Elegance, which is really cool. I always wanted to write about the Mayans and the temples and the sun gods, and
Oh, that's cool.
ripping the hearts out of people, to sacrifice to the sun gods, just so their plants would grow. There's a
Yeah.
movie called Apocalypto. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's
It's on my
killer
list.
movie. Man, you got to watch it. It inspired me a lot. Another one is Schizoid Platform, Brainwasher, the
Nice.
Sainted Devil, Jeopardy Room, um, Southern Fried Homicide.
That's good. You got
I
some
know,
good working titles.
I think so, man. Another one, Blood Syndicate, and the Six Finger, and there might be a couple other ones. But
That's
I was
great.
always big. I'm always big on my titles because I was researching. I'm always gathering stuff, and all the years we weren't doing anything, I was still doing something because as a creator or a writer, you want to always create and write. Yep, someone's at the door.
Well, the title's the most
Um,
important. Like it's the first impression people get of a song. It's either reading the back of the record or, even electronically on Spotify, you see the track before you play it. So it's the first impression people have. So I fully agree. Having gotta have a good title.
it also it sets the tone, for what you're about to hear. And my deal is the way I write is sort of like poetry in an abstract form of reality. That's what that abstract reality stuff was all about. But it's really thought process in humanities. It's things that we deal with when we look in the mirror. It's like relationships, the quality of your life, or just it's what we do every day. And in the old days, you're writing about thunder and lightning and posers and metal and thunder and fire. And as I grew up, I learned to write a little bit more, thought provoking. And now maybe there's a message there for others, but you got to search for it and figure it out yourself and kind of read between the lines. And it's a paradox, it's a parallel, and that's what I enjoy most. Is I had an opportunity to create again. It's a blank canvas, and it's like, wow, what am I going to do with this? How do I tell a story? And I think when we were talking the other day, I told you there's a line in Indulgence that says, "Singing songs to please myself. All at once things seem so small. Your grief and mine must intertwine indulgence," and it's like, hell, whatever that means, it's like, sounds good to me. Or, just in Penetration Point was I live the night to wake up this morning. Weapons of thought from the clouds of unknowing. Naked target on the beam of life. Your personality comes with the sunlight. It's
Yeah.
shit like that I always enjoy twisting it and singing it for myself, no one else. Just I'm singing shit that I'm thinking. And I just hope people, will appreciate it or dig a little deeper. Sometimes you wonder if people even read. So you can't do it for other people. You got to do it for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so cool to hear, man. Now I just want to ask before we wrap up. I know we were talking about the whole band's history and timeline. Was there ever an instance where like because you're so theatrical with the TVs and everything you're doing, was there ever an instance where like you actually got like seriously hurt doing what you do? Or were
Well,
you able to be safe during all of it?
you tried to make it controlled violence, and you don't let anybody else mess with my gimmick. If people would come up and try to get the TV, I would always make a spectacle of them and like pile drive them or, body slam and throw them.
Yeah, yeah.
And there would be people that would try that, and they're trying me. It's like a lion. Don't come and take my food because you're gonna get what the lion would give you. But sometimes they'll sneak when I'm not looking. It's happened before. It happened. One dude did it in Portland when we played there, and I like, fuck, I wish I would have got a hold of that guy. He grabbed the TV and threw it down or some shit. But I mean, I definitely, you know, you can't play the game and not feel the pain. But blood in the eye, never say die. No, it's a thumb in the eye. Never say die. Blood brings a crazy light to the sky. And when the coolest part for me is when I finally get to that point, I'm holding the TV up and it's over my head, but I see my reflection and my vision. I see myself in the TV screen looking down, and I'm looking up. I'm like, this shit's about to go down, man. I'm like, this is it. It's
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
it's the craziest feeling. But what I try to do is like a bullfighter. A bullfighter messes with the bull the whole time, and you know what happens at the end to the bull. So I'll take you on that trip the whole show, messing with the TV, trying to turn it on with the remotes, and I'll just look into it and maybe do some divination, looking into the TV screen, and I'll talk to it,
Yeah.
and I just try to take people on that trip because my job is the only job I know is to create kind of mayhem, theatrical way, but also is to burn images in people's brains. When they go home, I want them to go, damn, I'm not going to forget that shit. That was like, I've seen a lot of bands, but I've never seen that before. And then if they got a chance to meet or talk, then we give them the time and make their day that way as well, because I love to talk to the fans. And I remember trying to meet Ozzy and Kiss and Bad Company and the Scorpions, and used to go to every show at Lakeland Civic Center, go to the hotel and bring the Kerrang magazines or whatever and get them to sign it. And man, when those bands gave us that moment, we love those bands even more. I remember the great feeling I had because they were so cool, and those were our heroes. We had posters of them on our walls. So now, if I could do that to someone and give them that feeling, I'll make their day every time because I remember how cool that was. And to make someone's moment, I think that's what life's about too, brother. It's giving the value to others. It's making someone's life change in any way possible, from charity to benefits to just being kind. If we were all kinder to others, the world would be a better place. Can I
It sure
testify?
would.
It's like,
Test.
and, and
Yeah.
and and it's my job too to kind of be like a preacher sometimes on stage and get people fired up to the celebration that we're all sharing under this roof tonight, and how we can't take this night back. So how we're going to celebrate, and like in the old days, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis, um, Little Richard, you know, would be on the same stage sometimes, and they'd share that stage, and like Little Richard would get off the stage and go to Jerry Lee Lewis and say, top that. And then Jerry Lee would have to go on and he'd be playing, and at the end he'd burn his piano, he'd light it on fire, and say there. And that's the mentality you have to have, people. If you're in a band, take the stage, take it, take it, and take it. I mean, just because it's your stage, and that's the time to do it. And that's the best thing we could do in rock and roll, metal, any performance is, do what you do. And damn, if I'll never stop doing that shit. You know, I pity
Yeah,
bands
I
that
don't think it
play
will.
after us. I pity
Yeah.
bands that play after us, and that's not a a bodacious thing to say. It's just real. It's real because I've never worried about those operatic singers and the guys that could hit all the notes and all these, you know, skillful shit before us. Just let us hit the stage and we do what we do, and that's all we do. And I always love that because that's what metal's about. The next band will come in and they'll do the same thing, man. It's like Nuclear Assault played after us at the Chainsaw Massacre and three other bands, and I was loving it because we played early into a prime crowd, and they had to follow us, man. So, and then the fans will be the judge. You know, they'll tell you who they remember or they love to see or whatever. You know, so I love that. I love it.
For sure, healthy competition definitely brings out the best in all
Exactly.
artists across the board. Now you're pretty much a mentor of so many artists. Now I'm curious, what's like the best advice you ever got?
Man, that's a good question because the best advice is probably the advice I never got because there wasn't anybody to give me advice. There really wasn't. I would just watch, listen, and learn to whoever I was idolizing, or I was like reading motivational speakers and shit like that. And then, because I was running a business and stuff. So I'm an entertainer, but I'm working on my craft, on my business, research, development, whatever. So there really wasn't a lot. What I did, I learned from other people's actions, by their hard work and dedication. And people think a band came out and it made $1 million or million hit single, and they think they just happened overnight. But those bands have been out 10, 20 years sometimes before that happened to them. And, you just got to kind of know your history and know your role and have your own plan. And don't wait for someone to tell you how to do it because I really didn't get that because I was just like shot out of a cannon and didn't stop. I had to blaze our own trail. And that was my job to do that. Because, like I said, I really never thought I was a singer. I was just a performer or something. I played on stage. I played on stage to be a singer. And it took me around the world and did a lot of other stuff. So you can
Yeah.
fake it till you make it. Don't let anybody tell you how to do it, where to do it, when to do it. No matter what you're doing, anything you do in life, man. If you're the street sweeper, be the best damn street sweeper there is, man. If you're a bus driver, whatever, take care of people. You know what? Give them 110%. Then give value. In my business, I want people to come in early and stay late. I don't want people to come in late and go home early. I want them to have the boss's back. And I
Yeah.
told my guys, I publish a magazine. I'd say, Lude, I'll be your best boss you ever had. I'll loan you money. I'll help you fix your car. I'll give you time off. But if I say move it to the right, just move it to the right. Just change it to blue. If I say change it to blue and trust me, okay? I just
Yeah.
need you to have my back. Give me some value. Say, hey, boss, or Ron, look, check this out. Look what I've created. Don't wait for me to have to pull that out of you, even though I do every day. You try to align yourself with the proper people and do your homework, whatever you're doing, man. That's the best. I really just watched other people's success to try to try to get a grip on anything
Mm.
because there was no standards of measuring, for us. We didn't have bands to open up. We played with Sabotage a few times, and the few times we did play with them, every time they would like shut the power off or the lights and cut us off early. I swear to God, man.
Really?
Yeah, they'd be bad because I broke the microphones or mic stands, and we were doing stupid shit. But man, there's a few times when they
Wow.
cut us off like three songs short because we were getting a great response, I think, and they just wanted to say, "Get these guys off stage."
Wow. That's sabotage
And I,
out of
I
every
love
man.
John and them too. They're great people. And there was one time we were playing at London Victory Club, right? We were all up in the dressing room, and they were up there. John was with somebody else, and I was all dressed up with all my shit on. We walked out, but I didn't leave totally. I was right by the front door. I was right by the door, and I heard him tell somebody, "Go wait till you get a load of these guys. They're the shits." That's what he said about it. I heard him say that. I go, did he say the shit or the shits? He said the shits. He goes, wait till you get a load of these guys. It's just funny, man.
That's funny. Well, this has been awesome talking to you. Now, I just want to know what's the future of Nasty Ronnie look like, and if there's anything we didn't cover, feel free to, um, you know, touch on it.
Well, man, you've given me a lot of great space to talk and elaborate, and you've been a great interviewer, getting right to the
Thank
point
you.
with the questions. You're prepared, and anybody listening to this, support Disturbing the Priest and Brandon, what he's doing here. This is a young dude. You were born in the '90s.
I was born in 1998. I'm
Yeah,
25 years old.
'98. Here's a guy born in the '90s, but he's bringing back old school metal and he's giving it to you people, man. Respect that because it's so important. People like Brandon and what he's doing and all the bands that he brings on. It's not just us, it's not just me, but it's that movement that he's helping fortify. And I mean, that's what I dig is people like you, Brandon, who's out there reaching out to me saying, hey, I want to date Nasty Ronnie. Of course, I'm going to give you the time because I respect what you're doing, brother, and keep up the great work. And as far as me, I'm working on that blank canvas, man. Right now, I'm even working on songs this morning. I'm touching up the lyrics. I'm trying to fit them in place. I'm nervous. I have anxiety. I mean, everybody wants to see what the vocals are going to sound like, and man, it's some complicated, crazy music again that I'm dealing with, and I'm just going to have to get through it. So I'm not totally sure. I'm like, wow, man, it's sort of like when the green flag drops, the bullshit stops, and that's
Yeah,
where I'm gonna have to just stop
that's
the
great.
bullshit and produce something here. And I got those cool song titles. I got some cool lyrics. Now, how do the puzzle pieces all fit together? And then we'll see if the masses enjoy this. And it's just it's an amazing thing to be at my age. I mean, I'm 62. I was born in 1961. And to be able to still smash TVs on stage and teach younger kids the art of mayhamic destruction, I enjoy that. I mean, it's almost like Picasso in his later in life, how he wanted to produce more and more and more and more. That's where I'm at. I mean, it's like every show's a little different. How do you connect? How do you get the message across? The music, the impact, the image, but the message. I have messages in the music and at the shows to bring people together, to make them better people, and to enjoy their lives and love each other. And I think that's important too. And so I just think it's just a matter of connecting, communication, and that's what the future's about. Is just creating more friends and living life, with the family and enjoying it because we learn every day how to be better people and how to give more value to the people we have relationships with. It's so important.
Yeah, yeah. No matter what age, it's the legacy that will stay forever, and I think that's what's important. And that's what's important to me, representing so many of these bands. I've actually had Exhumer on, which you guys toured with, funny enough. But yeah, man, it's been an absolute honor talking to you. I definitely hope to see you. I'm currently in New England. I'm looking to possibly go back to Texas. So if you guys are ever around there, we'll definitely keep in touch. Regardless, you have complete guest pass for this podcast if you ever want to be back on again. My absolute pleasure, man. So thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it.
Brandon, thank you, Brandon. We are playing San Antonio, Texas, a big metal fest in August. I believe it's the 17th and 18th or 16th and 17th. So it should be really cool. I think we're actually headlining on the Saturday night, and it,
Sweet.
you could probably Google that. But yeah, let's when the record comes out, I'd like to give you an opportunity again to talk about it. Once you hear it, we could talk about it, and because you could put it in perspective. You seem to know the history pretty well. Like I said, you're well prepared, and I just appreciate your time, man, and being professional and everything you're doing to support heavy metal. It's a great thing you're doing.
It's my honor, man. Thank you so much. I'm Brandon Battick, and this is Disturbing the Priest.
It's death! I've just seen death!